Bernie Sanders out on the campaign trail today. He made an official push for his socialist agenda. Here's the proposals he's planning.
Every American, regardless of his or her income, is entitled to the right to a decent job that pays a living wage, the right to quality health care, the right to a complete education, the right to affordable housing, the right to a clean environment, and the right to a secure retirement. Democratic socialism means, to me, requiring and achieving political and economic freedom in every community. The only way we achieve these goals is through a political revolution.
Sanders also slammed President Trump, accusing him of being a socialist, but one for the wealthy.
While President Trump and his fellow oligarchs attack us for our support of democratic socialism, they don't really oppose all forms of socialism. They may hate democratic socialism because it benefits working people, but they absolutely love corporate socialism that enriches Trump and other billionaires.
Meanwhile, a new Harris poll showing that 55% of women between the ages of 18 and 54 actually support pure socialism. So, Greg, I'm coming to you first because I want to hear your response, your thoughts on the idea that Sanders says Trump is a socialist for the rich.
I know, crazy, huh? He is preaching revolution during the largest period of economic expansion in recent history, and for the first time there's like no war in the Western Hemisphere, and he's pushing an ideology, ironically, that crushes economic expansion and inevitably results in violence and war, because when people want to achieve, you have to, if you want an equality of outcomes, you have to crush them. I mean, he is making a case for socialism during the greatest economic time in history. That's like going to a healthy village in the Middle Ages and extolling the virtues of the plague. It is absolutely, it makes no sense. So it's wrong. It's actually morally wrong, because people are living longer, healthier lives, and he's preaching a belief system that starves people to death. It's wrong. Yeah. Terrible.
Katie, though, what I was getting at with Greg was, he's saying Trump is for socialism for the rich, while Sanders says he's for socialism for working families. Let me just give you an example. Sanders says lower health care costs, lower the cost of education, let's make reasonable housing prices. I think most Americans would say, yeah, that's a good idea.
I think that Bernie Sanders maybe should sell 2 of his 3 homes before he starts preaching about rich people being the enemy. Notice how he caps the number for his estate tax at $3.5 million, while he's worth about $1.5 million. Interesting. He's changed his stump speech from millionaires and billionaires to just billionaires. But he's preaching something, you know, he's saying he wants to redo the New Deal. That FDR had a good vision for the country. But if you actually look at the results of that for the past 50 years, we spent $21 trillion, which was supposed to bring people out of poverty. It has not, but capitalism has. Capitalism has not only brought people out of poverty in America, but all over the world throughout the past half a century. And that is what we should be focused on, not taking from others and saying that every single thing is a right. And one more thing, he keeps saying that this isn't about real socialism because he doesn't want to take over every kind of industry. In order to provide economic rights and healthcare rights and every right that he listed in his speech, you have to take over industries and force them to provide it, because that's the only way that you can deliver on those promises.
I didn't think he was saying about take over industries, but that's what you
how do you
He's talked about
have
that.
to.
He's talked about that since the 70s.
No, that was way back.
Yeah, but in the 70s, when he was also extolling the virtues of the Soviet Union, where he conveniently honeymooned, he was also talking about taking over not only healthcare, but entire sectors like banking, and he really hasn't changed that much. The thing about Bernie Sanders, and you know, you try and press him, but he's actually very good at weaseling out of answering some of these critical questions. Define socialism, because they're constantly changing the term and the definition. And he says, well, it's democratic socialism. So there's a qualification there, but that's still socialism. And Katie's absolutely right. It is a taking. It is a government taking. And the idea that the government owes me this, the government can't just provide it. The government has to take it from somewhere else. And I think people are going to be shocked when they realize they're the ones who are being taken from. Yep. And their taxes are going to double just to pay for health care. And I disagree with him. I don't think all of these things are a right that the government owes you. And if you look at education, if you look at health care, if you look at housing, just those three areas where the government is so vastly involved, that's where these programs are upside down. That's where people are hurting the most. And that's where lower income people get absolutely hosed because there's too much government interference.
Jesse, so this is, you know, let's just play hardball on real politics, because we have a Quinnipiac poll, but even the president's own pollster, Tony Fabrizio, saying, I think 6 Democrats right now beat Trump head-to-head nationally, including Bernie Sanders. What do you make of this?
I don't believe those polls. I think they had Reagan losing in a landslide in '84 to Mondale, and he was the one that won in that landslide.
I don't remember that.
So we're way, way, way out from what's really going to happen. To your point about Trump being a corporate socialist, Trump wasn't the one that bailed out the big banks. Trump wasn't the one that threw $500 million at Solyndra. Trump's actually jawboning a lot of these big corporations to keep production here instead of offshoring it overseas. He's jawboning like Lockheed Martin to keep the prices down on the jets. Wall Street donated more to Hillary than they did to Donald Trump. He's constantly going after billionaires like Bezos and what's his name, George Soros. And if you look, income inequality has actually shrunk under President Trump, whereas under Barack Obama, it expanded.
Wait a second. I don't know about that. But anyway,
I do.
But let me just say, I just trust you. But let me just say, what about the tax cut? I think what Bernie is saying is, if actually we do take from people, we take from the working class people in this country who are having a tougher time, and we give it to the rich and say, oh, it'll be trickled down. If the rich do better,
we didn't give it to the rich. It was their money to begin with. And I've always said I thought the tax cut should have been much bigger for individual and family taxpayers, but the companies needed a break too because they were unfairly targeted compared to the rest of the West.
The fact is, a majority of the country, the majority of the middle class got a tax cut.
Like
the New York Times even admitted that they did. So to say that the middle class didn't get one is not true.
The other thing, too, is you keep saying, you know, we need to have affordable this and affordable that. Right. What makes things affordable? Competition. What's missing in socialism? Competition. What raises prices? If you go to any socialist country and you can't find a loaf of bread, and if you find one, it's $47.50. Competition.
Right.
So it's like the only way. Sanders doesn't like competition. That's why he's never had a real job.
Don't you remember that he, you know, this curmudgeon went into a bodega and complained that there were too many choices for deodorant?
Yes.
As though choice was somehow a foul concept. And it's like, no, that's great.
Yes,
when
just
the
pick one.
market is providing that and you can pick exactly what you want, I think that's a sign of success. And to your point, Juan, I think Bernie Sanders could have done very well in 2008. And that was the time to run on this agenda. And because, you know, you remember that was the beginning of the Great Recession.
Right.
And he would have had an easier time selling some of these programs, because if you're selling a massive, too big to fail, multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package, then that's the time you tell people, and we're going to pay for housing, and we're going to pay for education.
But I don't think he's talking. You guys talking about takeover of government, or takeover of industry. I think he's talking about Democrat.
What did he say about insurance companies, though? What did he say about insurance companies?
No, what he's saying is democratic socialism, which is basically safety nets, which is why I think it's popular.
Medicare for all takes everybody's health insurance that we all like from our companies that we work for, and they give it over to the government, and the government runs health care. That's a government takeover, and I don't think the government can even handle the small things. You want to put them in charge of health care?
We're saying it because Bernie Sanders said it. That's what the facts are.
All right.